Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Friday Q&A, a webinar series produced by the UF Thomson Earth Systems Institute, Scientists in Every Florida School program, and the Community Scholars Initiative. PM for 30 minutes, a scientist will present on their area of expertise, followed by a question and answer session. Scientists in Every Florida School is a free program housed within the Thomson Earth Systems Institute at the University of Florida. The CEFS program connects and builds long-term partnerships between teachers and scientists in order to bring current scientific research and big data into classrooms in Florida and beyond. The Community Scholars Initiative is based at Valencia College in Orlando, Florida. Our goal is to connect, create, and elevate educational experiences in the classroom and our community. Supported by Lake Nona community, we facilitate programs in both Orange and Osceola County schools and work with community leaders and businesses to build out-of-school learning programs. During the COVID-19 school closures, we are happy to partner with CEFS to continue engaging with our students and teachers and parents in a digital platform. By Daniel Friedline. He serves as the City of Orlando's Sustainability Project Manager with a focus on livability and access to local food for its residents. He has also piloted a beekeeping educational program with the Paramore Kids to provide at-risk high school students a career path in apiculture and to support the social enterprise Black Bee Honey. Daniel holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Studies from the University of Central Florida and is also a U.S. Air Force veteran. Joining him is Kara Borowski, a Sustainability Project Coordinator with the City of Orlando. She has a BS in Environmental Science and Biology from Florida State University and a Master's in Business Administration from Rollins College Kremer Graduate School of Business. As they tell you about their work, please add your questions into the chat and one of our moderators will ask your questions for you. And without further ado, we will hand it over to Kara and
project.
All right. Can everybody hear us just fine?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for being here. We're going to tell you a little bit about honeybees and pollination today. So honeybees' scientific name is Apis mellifera, and they're classified as insects. They all live together in a hive, and they are eusocial organisms. So two of the things that classify organisms as eusocial is they collectively care for their brood. They do it all together. And another thing is they have a division of labor. So some of them are reproductive and some of the bees are non-reproductive. So honeybees can be classified into 3 different castes. The first is the queen. So the queen, there's only one per colony, and she's in charge of the mating and reproduction of the rest of the hive. She mates with another caste called drones. Drones are going to be the only males that are in the hive, and their only job is going to be reproducing with the queen. Once they mate with the queen, then they pass away. Their job is totally done. But most of the bees that you are going to see out and about in the world and inside a hive are going to be the worker bees. Worker bees are exclusively females, and they do almost all of the work inside and outside of the hive. So they're going to be the ones that you see flying about, going to all of the flowers and plants and collecting that nectar and pollen to bring back to the hive. They care for all of the brood, and they help make the honey. Next slide, please. So when bees leave the hive to collect nectar and pollen to bring back to the colony, that means they're involved in pollination. And bees are not the only organism that is involved in pollination. It is other insects like ladybugs and wasps. It can be birds and even mammals that are involved in pollination. But we'll focus on what a bee does. So when a bee lands on a flower, the pollen collects on their body as they suck up the nectar from the flower. And you can see the 2 pictures of the bees that are on the slides. One of them has the pollen collected on its legs, and that's going to be on their honey baskets. And the next one has the pollen all over its entire body. So once they collect the nectar from one flower, they fly to another. As they do that, the pollen falls off into the next flower. Once that happens, the pollen is involved in fertilization, and then new seeds and new flowers are produced from that. And this is really important because 75% of the world's crops depend on pollinators. It's going to be the fruits and vegetables and nuts that we all love to eat. So less pollinators means less lettuce, less broccoli, almonds, strawberries, all of the things that we and other animals depend on for survival, which is one of the reasons pollinators are so important. And next slide, please. So this is a few pictures of what you're going to see from inside the hive. The top of the picture is the brood cells. So that's where the eggs or larvae are inside the hive. The bees then cap over them as they grow, and then they hatch out of those. At the bottom, you see some pollen cells. So when bees return from their flowers, the nectar and pollen is distributed into these cells where they then use it to make honey. So Daniel's actually going to start to open up the hive, and then we'll be able to show you everything that is inside the hive that we have.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just as Kara had said, bees are very important to us as humans for their ability to be able to help with food production. So not only with the transfer of pollen and with our plants, but also with the ability to produce its own food source for humans, and that is honey. So here in the city of Orlando, we have a program set up where we have a hive, and we are able to actually teach students about beekeeping and why it's important. Beekeeping is necessary. It's an ability for us to be able to keep these bees, keep the colonies healthy and sustain them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this apart for you so you can see it. This is a fascinating operation. What we have here is a normal hive setup. And we're going to go ahead and take off what's called the medium super. Medium super has a very important role. You'll see that here in a little bit. But what we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at the actual main part of the hive here. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab a little bit of smoke. We're going to use this. We're going to puff it around on the bees. What this does is this is helping us. It doesn't allow the bees to be able to communicate as much. They back away from the smoke. That helps me as a beekeeper. And as you can see, we like to protect ourselves. So we wear a bee suit. We cover ourselves with gloves, a mask, to be able to get in here and take a look. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take apart this hive, and I'm going to pull out what's called a frame for you. So a frame is something that we use to go ahead and help the bees get started on making an actual comb. So we're going to go ahead and pull this out, and we'll show you a couple of different ones. There are a couple of different casts, as Kara was talking about, and if you're able to see, there's a few bees in here that look a little bit bigger. Some of those that are bigger, those are the drone bees. Those are the male bees. There aren't a lot of those inside of the hive. They play a particular role inside of the hive. And so the rest that you see on here are females. So inside of here, you can see what we call the brood section. We have other areas that are capped, and we have some areas that are that have honey in them. There's brood over here in the corner. You can see that by the larvae that are down inside of there. Some of these will actually have the larvae, and then they put the food source in there for them. I'm going to go ahead and pull out another frame just so you get a look. And I'm going to hang that one right there for you. We'll take a look at this one. And this one has a great amount on here for you to be able to see. And again, let me give this a shake so you can actually take a look. So in here, you can see some of the actual larvae that are in the comb there. And so what we do when we tend to bees is we actually come in here and we take a look. We'll open this up frequently. But the goal is to be able to make sure that we're maintaining a good health for our colony. It's very important. Bees can be susceptible to diseases, just the same as everything else. One of the biggest threats right now to bees is the varroa mite. So the varroa mite has the ability to affect an entire colony by latching onto bees. They perforate inside of the hive with the bees, and then they will eventually cause the decline of a colony. So we try and protect against that. If we see them, we have a specific protocol that we use for treating against that. And I'll go ahead and pull one more for you so you're able to see. If you take a good look right on top, you'll see where there's a separation of the comb, and the bees are actually starting to eat that honey. Now, if you're wondering, well, why do bees make honey in the first place? Well, spring, there are plenty of flowers. The bees go out, so they go get pollen, they go get nectar, they bring it back. And as they go through the summer and they go through the fall, bees have the ability to go ahead and prepare for winter. So what they're doing is they're storing up a food source. So they're taking that honey, they're making the honey, they're storing it, and they'll be able to feed off of that in the actual winter time. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and pull a section that has primarily honey in it, and this is that medium super that we were talking about. And in this is primarily honey production. The queen is busy inside of the actual bottom part, the deep supers, and so a lot of the other worker bees have built up comb inside of here, and they are actually making the honey, and they are storing it. So let me go ahead and pull out a section for you.
While we're doing that, we can also take some Q&A if there is any.
Sure, Kara, there are quite a few questions. A lot of people are really interested in what's going on with these bees here. We're going to start with a question from Jennifer. Jennifer says, I recently saw the murder hornets that are making their way into the United States can negatively affect bees. Is that true?
So there have been cases of it. One of the sources that we consistently go back to is the University of Florida, IFAS. They have a great program for being able to take a look at anything that could affect bees in general statewide. There haven't been any reports in Florida at this time. So right now we are continuing to watch. That's why it's important for each beekeeper to come out and take a look at what's going on inside of their hives. But right now, at this time, we haven't seen any. It's a really good question.
We also have a question from Laura. She asks, how many bees are typically in a hive?
So inside of a hive itself, and this is just a smaller hive, because we just have the super frame and the medium frame. But generally, a hive has somewhere between about 20,000 and 80,000 bees inside of it at any given time. Obviously, if we were to put more boxes on top and allow for the queens to lay more and more inside of this, we would increase the amount of bees. That was a good question.
We have a question from Brian who asks, what does the city of Orlando do with the honey that's made?
Great question, too. So we actually, Kara and I started this program in an effort with the city of Orlando in an effort to help another program is called Black Bee Honey. Black Bee Honey is set up inside of the city of Orlando. And the goal is to be able to help students that live in the West Orlando area to be able to understand entrepreneurship and to be able to sell the honey. And so we set this up for them to be able to acquire their own local source of honey, which is important. But also to be able to teach those young kids to be able to become beekeepers. It's a very important skill that can be used later on in life. You could do this on your own. You could do this as part of the industry to be a large-scale beekeeper. But it was a great initiative set up by the city of Orlando and with Paramore Kids Zone to be able to start teaching these kids.
Scarlett is curious, does the queen bee do anything other than have babies?
Well, she's got to eat every once in a while. But essentially, her major role is to be able to lay enough of the eggs inside of a hive to be able to sustain the colony. Bees don't have that long of a lifespan in general compared to the queen. So she has to continuously lay enough to be able to have them go out, get pollen, get nectar, bring it back, and build up enough honey to be able to sustain the hive throughout the winter.
Lamia asks, how exactly do bees make honey?
It's a really good question. We get this one a lot, and it's really fascinating. So what happens is a worker bee is going to go out. It is going to collect nectar. It is going to store that in a secondary stomach. It's going to bring it back. And then it is going to come back into the hive, and it's going to regurgitate that nectar. And so what happens is that bees will actually pass that back and forth. And what they're doing is they're absorbing some of the water content that's inside of pollen. They're also adding enzymes into it. And what happens is once it gets to a point and it's been passed enough from bee to bee, they will actually put that inside of one of the areas where it'll be stored and eventually capped. But before it can be capped, they want to try and reduce the water content, the moisture content as much as possible. They'll flap their wings. That will help to pull a little bit more of the moisture content out of it as much as possible, and then they'll put a cap on it. The reason for that is because honey needs to be able to be stored for long periods of time. And if it had too much water in it, it could spoil. And so that's why bees do that.
Rachel's curious, what was the smoke that we saw inside the hive earlier?
What is the what?
The smoke.
So I use pine needles. Different beekeepers will do different things, but I use pine needles. I put it inside of the smoker. I'll light it. And then every once in a while, I'll give it a little puff to make sure it stays lit. And again, that's just to disrupt the ability for bees to be able to communicate. Our goal is to kind of, if they can't communicate as much, they can't say danger as much. And so they just go about their normal activities inside of the hive.
Valentina is curious, what is about bees and honey that some people are allergic to?
That's a really good question. Honestly, I can't answer that one at this point. I'm not familiar with what about the honey itself makes it have an allergic reaction to it. That's a little bit more about our human chemistry and the ability for a specific chemical inside of the body to trigger an allergic response.
Patricia,
that's a good question, though, and I'm going to have to research that one.
Patricia asks, how much honey can a beekeeper get from a hive?
So on average, what we can expect is probably about somewhere between, I'd say, with this one specifically, I'd say about 40 to 60 pounds of honey. That equates to roughly about a 5-gallon bucket of honey. But if you do a bigger hive, you can get to about upwards of about 100 pounds of honey. So maybe 2 5-gallon buckets.
Melanie is wondering, is it possible for a hive to run out of room?
Yes, and that's a really good question. It is possible for a hive to run out of room. What happens is that triggers a response for the bees to be able to start creating another spot inside of the hive for another queen to be able to be created. What happens is the queens at that point, one will fly off with part of the hive and they will start a new hive. So generally a hive has one queen, but if they sense that there's too much that's going on with it and they need more room, they need more space, then they will actually want to start another hive.
Stephanie is curious, why would bees swarm onto pavement?
Swarm onto pavement. There could be a lot of answers for that. That could be, the ability for them to have a spot that they feel is safe. It might be a specific scent that's in the area. But generally my thought is that it was a spot that they thought was safe at the moment while they're going to look for another location where they could actually set up a colony.
Michael is wondering, is it true that bees mate high in the sky and afterwards the male bees lose their reproductive organs and die?
Yes. So good job on your research on that one. when a queen is born, what happens is the queen will fly out. She will leave the hive, and she will mate. She will mate with several different drones before she comes back. At that point is referred to as a mated queen. And so the goal is to be able to try and have enough of the semen that she needs to be able to continue to lay eggs over her lifespan. They don't want the queens to be able to be flying out every day. They want to keep her safe inside of the hive. But yes, when a drone mates, it does cause a specific reaction, which causes an appendage loss, which then causes the bee to die.
Laura is asking, what is the life cycle of a bee?
So with a bee, what happens is there's an egg that's laid, that larvae that is formed after that. Once the egg is hatched, the bees will feed at that point until it grows to a certain level. What happens is it turns into a pupa, where they'll put a cap over the top of that cell, where it grows into an adult form. And at that point, it will come out as a adult bee. From that point on, there are what we call nurse bees. Nurse bees tend to what's going on in the hive because they haven't really formed that ability to fly yet. Once they get that full ability to start their flights, they will then leave as worker bees, and they will start going out and collecting pollen, collecting nectar.
Rafa asks, do bees stay alive during the winter by staying inside the hive?
Yes, that's one of the main things that I think is so cool about bees. Is bees have the ability to work together to thermoregulate. And so what happens is the females will actually kick out all of the male bees that are left over. They will kick them out. The queen will be in the hive. She will still lay a little bit, but generally that production cycle is slowed down. And then they will be able to maintain, if everything goes well, their own temperature inside of the hive that keeps them alive. And they will feed off the honey that is stored until springtime, when they're able to come out again.
Doug wants to know if he can buy the honey that's produced by the city of Orlando.
So we actually just started the program in October. This is our first one. We are getting several more hives up here for the city of Orlando. And Black Bee Honey, and through their beekeeping program, is going to learn how to extract honey from this. As you can see, this whole frame has honey inside of it. And so the beekeepers are going to learn how to extract that, and then they're going to start being able to sell their own locally sourced honey. So the answer is yes. That will be here within the next few months.
All right, Daniel, we have time for just a few more questions. So our next question is going to be from Aiden, who asks, how big is a bee colony?
This one right here, again, this is a smaller colony, but we can expect somewhere around 30,000 bees inside of here. Generally, like I said, there are about 20,000, maybe upwards of 80,000 bees inside of a colony. And that just depends a lot upon if things are good in the summertime. They've got a lot of nectar pollen available. If the queen is laying and she's doing a really good job, then the numbers stay very high. If a colony's sick, if the queen isn't doing well, the numbers will actually start to dip.
Scarlett asks, how long do most bees live?
No.
So on average, the queen, or the queen, we'll start with her. So the queen actually can live upwards of about 3 to 5 years, which is actually really interesting for this type of insect. The others, though, the workers inside of the hive, they only live for a few weeks before they pass away. And again, that's the point of the queen being able to try and lay as many eggs as possible. I don't know if someone was thinking this question, but how many eggs does the queen lay within a day? And the answer is about 1,200. So she does stay very busy at any given point.
Emma is wondering, is there a king bee?
There is not. There is not. I get that one quite a lot. There is not. The fascinating part of honeybees is the fact that they rely on the female heavily. So they need that female to continue to lay the eggs. There's only that one female. And the males inside of the actual colony, their main goal is just to try and go out and mate with a queen and then immediately die. So no, there is no king bee.
All right, Daniel, thank you so much. Do you have any final thoughts or anything you would like to leave our attendees with?
One of the important things about this that I want to try and get across, you know, a lot of people think, oh, there's a bee, it's going to harm me. But really, bees serve a great purpose, not only to humans, but to nature, procreation, the passing of pollen. So next time you see a bee, be grateful for what they do, for the amount of food production that they are responsible for is incredible across the world. So next time you see them, next time you're around it, just you know, try and do a little thanks. Be thankful for bees and what they do.
Daniel, thank you so much. At this point, I'm going to pass things over to Stephanie for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much for that wonderful and very insightful presentation. I have to say it, that was unbelievable. We want to thank everyone for joining us on the call today to learn more about bees as pollinators, especially to our two guests from the City of Orlando's Department of Sustainability. Once again, you can join us every Friday for Q&A at 3 p.m. as part of a collaboration between scientists in every Florida school and the Community Scholars Initiative. You can learn more about our guests as well as our programs by visiting the websites you see on your screen. This recording will be found at UF Thompson Earth Systems YouTube channel, along with great educational resources we've curated on the topics of bees and pollination. Please be sure to register for next week's Q&A, where you're going to learn more about turtles, wildlife, careers, and conservation. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.